Captain Marcus Joe stood at the helm of the UES Hyperion, his weathered hands resting on the crystalline control interface. The massive vessel, humanity's latest achievement in space engineering, hummed with an energy that even the most advanced alien sensors couldn't properly classify. Behind him, Lieutenant Diana Patel monitored the quantum field matrices, her dark eyes reflecting the shimmer of holographic displays. "Proximity alert," announced First Officer James Akanjo, his rich voice carrying across the bridge. "Three Valkyrie warships dropping out of fold space. Their weapons are hot." Joe remained calm, even as the massive predatory vessels materialized before them. The Valkyrie were known throughout the galaxy as technological scavengers, always hunting for advanced ships to strip and study. The Hyperion must have seemed like an irresistible target. "Open communications," Joe ordered, straightening his midnight blue uniform. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the scaled visage of a Valkyrie commander, their serpentine features twisted into what passed for a smile among their species. "Human vessel," the Valkyrie commander's translator processed their hissing speech. "Your ship appears to be experiencing critical systems failures. Allow us to assist you." Joe exchanged a knowing look with his crew. The Valkyrie had been tracking them for days, waiting for an opportunity. Their sensor jamming technology was creating false readings of the Hyperion systems, a convenient excuse for piracy. "We appreciate your concern," Joe replied diplomatically, "but I assure you our systems are functioning perfectly. You may continue on your way." The Valkyrie commander's hood flared, bioluminescent patterns flickering with aggression. "We insist. Power down your shields and prepare for boarding, or we will be forced to take more direct action." "Final warning," Joe stated firmly, "withdraw your vessels." The response came in the form of energy torpedoes, three of them streaking toward the Hyperion. The bridge crew remained steady, trusting their captain and their ship. "Nullfield engaged," Lieutenant Patel reported calmly. What happened next would reshape galactic politics forever. As the torpedoes approached, they simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no impact. They dissolved into harmless particles, their energy dispersing like mist in sunlight. The Valkyrie ships launched another salvo, more desperate this time. Particle beams, plasma bolts, and graviton pulses all dissolved harmlessly against the Hyperion's nullfield. The technology didn't just stop attacks, it negated them at a fundamental level. "Their weapons are having no effect," Akanjo reported, though it was obvious to all. "They're powering up their main guns." Joe sighed. Lieutenant Patel demonstrate the reciprocal capability. Minimal setting. A subtle pulse emanated from the Hyperion, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in its precision. The Valkyrie ship's weapons immediately went dark, their engines sputtering to minimal power. They hung in space, not destroyed but thoroughly neutralized. "By the cosmic core," the Valkyrie commander's voice trembled. "What are you?" "We are human," Joe answered simply, "and we come in peace, but we will defend ourselves." He nodded to his communications officer. "Send a message to the Galactic Consensus. Include the sensor logs of this encounter. They should know that humanity's patience with pirates and aggressors is wearing thin." As the message was transmitted, Joe knew the real battle was just beginning. The nullfield technology would change everything. Humanity had developed it not out of aggression, but out of necessity. Too many colonies lost, too many lives ended in needless conflicts. But would the galaxy understand that? The Valkyrie ships were already being approached by rescue vessels, their crews shaken but unharmed. Word would spread quickly through the space lanes. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They could render the most powerful weapons useless, defeat enemies without destroying them, and maintain peace through absolute defensive superiority. "Captain," Akanjo spoke up, "we're receiving priority transmissions from Earth Command. The Galactic Consensus is convening an emergency session." Joe nodded, knowing that the real test would not be in combat, but in the diplomatic arena that awaited them. Humanity's greatest technological achievement was about to become its greatest political challenge. "Plot a course to Earth," he ordered. "It's time to face the music." As the Hyperion prepared to jump to fold space, Joe contemplated the path ahead. Humanity had created this technology to prevent war, but would it instead spark the greatest conflict the galaxy had ever seen? The answer to that question would soon reshape the destiny of every sentient species in known space. The grand chamber of the Galactic Consensus sprawled beneath a crystalline dome that reflected the light of three moons. Representatives from over 200 spacefaring civilizations filled the tiered seats, their murmurs echoing through the vast space. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Jun Wei-Chen stood alone at the presentation podium, his silver-streaked hair and traditional midnight diplomatic robes a stark contrast to the exotic forms surrounding him. High Chancellor Nix of the Eternals, their bioluminescent form pulsing with barely contained agitation, called the session to order. Their voice, translated through quantum matrices, resonated through the chamber. We convene this emergency session to address the grave matter of human technological advancement, specifically the weapon system designated Nullfield. Footage from the Valkyrie encounter played above the chamber. Many representatives flinched as they watched their weapons simply cease to exist against the Hyperion's defenses. The recording ended with the Valkyrie ships hanging helpless in space, their crews unharmed but their technology rendered useless. "This is an abomination," thundered Representative Koth of the Silicon Collective, their crystalline form vibrating with outrage. "The humans have created a technology that violates the fundamental laws of warfare established since the first Galaxy Compact." Ambassador Chen remained composed, his voice steady. "With respect, Representative Koth, our technology preserves life rather than ends it. The Valkyrie crew survived unharmed. Compare this to conventional weapons that would have vaporized their ships and all aboard." "That is precisely what disturbs us," hummed Elder Zaxel of the quantum consciousness, their holographic form flickering. "You have created something that makes the rest of our civilizations effectively defenseless, the balance of power." "Was never balanced," Chen interrupted, causing a ripple of shock through the assembly. Such directness was rarely displayed in the consensus. "In the past 60 years since humanity joined the galactic community, we have lost 17 colonies, 8 research stations, and over 2 million lives to various attacks. When we petitioned this body for protection, we were told to be patient, to understand the complexities of galactic politics." High Chancellor Nix's bioluminescence shifted to a deeper hue. "Ambassador, surely you understand our concern. This technology could be used to disable civilian vessels, medical facilities, entire planetary defense systems." "And yet we haven't done any of those things," Chen countered. "The Nullfield was tested and deployed with strict ethical protocols. It is programmed to respond only to offensive military technology. Civilian infrastructure remains unaffected." Representative Myra of the Helios Confederation, her energy form brightening, spoke next. "What prevents this technology from being stolen or replicated if it fell into the wrong hands?" "It cannot be replicated," Chen stated firmly. "The Nullfield is not merely a technology, it is the result of a unique convergence of human neurological patterns and quantum engineering. Any attempt to recreate it without human operators would result in catastrophic failure." The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations. Some representatives demanded immediate sanctions against Earth, others called for a complete quarantine of human space. A few quieter voices suggested that perhaps this development could lead to a more peaceful galaxy. High Chancellor Nix raised their appendages for silence. "Ambassador Chen, the consensus cannot allow a single species to possess such overwhelming defensive capability. We demand that humanity surrender this technology for study and controlled distribution among all spacefaring races." Chen's expression hardened slightly. "Chancellor, with respect, that is not going to happen. Humanity developed this technology out of necessity, not ambition. We watched our colonies burn, our people die, while this august body debated proper diplomatic protocols. We will not surrender our ability to prevent such tragedies in the future." "Then you leave us no choice," rumbled Representative Koth. "I move for an immediate vote on Resolution 7249, the implementation of total economic sanctions against Earth and all human colonies until they comply with consensus demands." As the motion was seconded and the voting process began, Chen noticed movement in the upper galleries. A hooded figure slipped away from the observation area, moving with peculiar urgency. Something about their movement triggered a memory, but before he could focus on it, High Chancellor Nix was speaking again. "Ambassador Chen, this is your final opportunity. Will humanity surrender the Nullfield technology to consensus control?" Chen stood straighter, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "Honorable representatives, humanity joins this consensus seeking peace and cooperation, but we will not achieve peace by leaving ourselves vulnerable to those who would harm us. The Nullfield stays under human control." The voting results appeared above the chamber, overwhelming support for sanctions against Earth. As the representatives began filing out, many avoiding Chen's gaze, the ambassador activated his secure comm link to Earth Command. "They've voted for sanctions," he reported quietly. "But something else is happening here. The reaction is too coordinated, too prepared. Someone knew about the nullfield before the Valkyrie incident." As Chen left the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that this crisis was about to become much more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The game being played had rules he couldn't yet see, and players moving in shadows beyond the consensus's gleaming halls. Deep within the lower levels of the consensus tower, in a chamber shielded from both conventional and quantum surveillance, 5 figures gathered around a table of living crystal. Their meeting wasn't on any official record, and their very presence in this location violated dozens of diplomatic protocols. Dr. Rhea Verma, Earth's chief of covert intelligence, studied the holographic data streaming before her. Her cybernetic eye whirred softly as it processed the encrypted information. The pattern is clear now. The Valkyrie attack wasn't random, they were pushed into it. Across the table, Ambassador Chen frowned. Pushed by whom? "The Eternals," came a voice from the shadows. A hooded figure stepped forward, the same one Chen had noticed in the gallery. As the hood fell back, it revealed the elegant features of Lyra Val, an Eternal defector who had been feeding intelligence to Earth for the past 3 years. Her bioluminescent patterns were muted, a sign of her severed connection to the Eternal collective. "My former people have been manipulating events for centuries," Lyra continued, her translator converting her harmonic speech to human standard. "The Eternals present themselves as peaceful mediators, but they've been secretly steering galactic development according to their own agenda." Captain Joe of the Hyperion, attending via secure quantum projection, leaned forward. "What agenda?" Dr. Verma manipulated the holographic display, revealing a complex web of technological developments across different species. "Look at the pattern. Every time a species develops a technology that could shift the balance of power, they're either pushed into a conflict that destroys their research, or the consensus implements regulations that effectively halt development." "But why?" Chen asked, though his expression suggested he was beginning to understand. The fifth figure spoke, General Omar Santos of Earth Defense Command, his dark features illuminated by the holographic light. "Because the Eternals are hiding something, something big, Dr. Verma." Rhea expanded a particular section of the data web. "We've analyzed centuries of technological suppression cases. The Eternals aren't just maintaining balance, they're preventing anyone from developing technology that could detect or interact with something they're concealing. The nullfield didn't just scare them because of its defensive capabilities. It terrified them because it operates on principles that could expose their secret." "The Eternal Veil," Lyra said softly, "a massive energy construct that surrounds their home system. They claim it's a cultural artifact, a religious symbol, but I discovered it's actually containing something, something that defies our understanding of physics." Captain Joe's hologram flickered as he processed this. "The nullfield. When we first tested it, we detected anomalous readings at the quantum level, energy patterns that shouldn't exist in our universe." "Exactly," Lyra confirmed. "The same energy signature as the Eternal Veil, just on a much smaller scale. Your technology stumbled onto something the Eternals have been hiding for millennia." Ambassador Chen stood, packing the small chamber. So the sanctions vote wasn't about fear of human military superiority, it was about containing this discovery. "And it gets worse," General Santos added grimly. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual movements. Several species that abstained from the sanctions vote have been mobilizing their fleets. The Eternals are calling in old favors, preparing for something big." "They're not going to wait for sanctions to work," Dr. Verma concluded. "They're planning to take the nullfield technology by force, and they'll use other species as proxies to do it, maintaining their image as peaceful mediators." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had unknowingly stumbled onto what might be the galaxy's greatest secret, and one of its oldest civilizations was preparing to bury that discovery at any cost. "We need to move first," Chen said finally. "Doctor, how much of the Eternal Veil have you mapped?" Rhea projected a new image, a massive energy structure surrounding a star system. "Enough to know it's not just containing something, it's holding something back. The energy patterns suggest temporal distortion on a massive scale." "Time manipulation?" Joe asked, his hologram showing clear concern. More like time preservation, Lyra corrected. The Eternals aren't just ancient, they're from an entirely different epoch of the universe. The veil isn't keeping something in, it's keeping time itself out. They've created a bubble of their own time frame, separate from the rest of the galaxy's temporal flow. General Santos straightened. That's why they fear the null field. It doesn't just negate energy, it synchronizes temporal states. It could disrupt their temporal isolation. We need to get this information to Earth Command immediately, Chen began, but Dr. Verma raised her hand. Already done, but we have maybe 48 hours before the Eternals realize we know. We need a plan. Captain Joe's hologram smiled grimly. I have one, but you're not going to like it. The Hyperion was built with certain capabilities we haven't revealed to anyone, not even the consensus. As Joe outlined his plan, the others listened with growing amazement. It was audacious, probably suicidal, and might just change the course of galactic history. The real question was, could they pull it off before the Eternals and their allies launched their attack? And what would happen if the veil came down? Some secrets they all knew were kept hidden for very good reasons. The Hyperion hung in space at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, its hull reflecting the distant starlight. On the bridge, Captain Joe watched as dozens of hostile ships emerged from fold space, their weapons already charged. The Coalition fleet assembled against them was impressive: Valkyrie dreadnoughts, Silicon collective crystalline ships, and Helios energy vessels, all coordinated by eternal tactical algorithms. They're hailing us, Lieutenant Patel reported, her fingers dancing over the quantum interface. Joe nodded on screens. The main display flickered to life, showing a split image of three commanders. The Valkyrie Admiral's scales gleamed with battle markings, while the Silicon Collective commander's crystalline form pulsed with aggressive energy patterns. Between them, an Eternal Overseer's bioluminescence rippled with barely contained fury. This is your final warning, the Eternal Overseer's harmonic voice reverberated through the bridge. Surrender your vessel and all nullfield technology. Further resistance will be considered an act of war against the galactic consensus. Joe smiled slightly. Interesting coalition you've assembled. Tell me, did you inform your allies about the true nature of the Eternal Veil, about why you're really here? The Overseer's patterns flickered with alarm, but before they could respond, another voice cut through the communication. Now, Captain, Dr. Verma's voice crackled through a quantum-encrypted channel. Joe's smile widened. I'm afraid we'll have to decline your generous offer. Lieutenant Patel, execute Protocol Omega. Across the galaxy, precisely coordinated events began to unfold. In the Consensus Tower, Ambassador Chen addressed an emergency session, broadcasting evidence of the Eternals' temporal manipulation. Dr. Verma and her team, stationed at key points around the Eternal Veil, activated devices that looked suspiciously like miniature nullfield generators. But the real shock came from the Hyperion itself. Its hull began to shift, revealing previously hidden structures that pulsed with familiar yet alien energy. By the first light, the Silicon Commander's crystalline form vibrated with shock. Those are precursor patterns. Joe nodded grimly. Humanity didn't just develop the nullfield technology, we rediscovered it. The precursors, those you call the first ones, left their legacy encoded in our very DNA. We're their designated inheritors. The Eternal Overseer's form flared with panic. Impossible, the precursors vanished eons ago before your species even evolved. Did they? Joe countered. Or did they seed our development, knowing we would eventually unlock their secrets? The nullfield isn't just a defensive technology, it's a key. A key to understanding what you've been hiding in that temporal bubble of yours. On the tactical display, more ships began emerging from fold space human vessels, their hulls now revealing similar precursor patterns. The Hyperion hadn't been unique. It had simply been the first to demonstrate the technology publicly. In the consensus chamber, Chen was delivering the final blow. The Eternals have maintained their power by trapping themselves in a temporal bubble, separate from the natural flow of time. They've manipulated galactic development for millennia, preventing any species from developing technology that might expose their temporal isolation. The Coalition fleet's formation began to waver as the truth spread through their ranks. The Valkyrie Admiral's scales shifted color in confusion. We were told this was about preventing human military dominance. You were used, Joe stated firmly. Humanity's crime wasn't developing powerful technology, it was stumbling onto the Eternals' greatest secret. The null-field technology naturally synchronizes temporal states. Its mere existence threatens their temporal isolation. Suddenly, alerts blared across the Hyperion's bridge. Multiple temporal distortions detected, Patel reported. The Eternal ships are attempting some kind of temporal jump. Not just the ships, General Santos's voice cut in through the quantum link. We're detecting massive temporal fluctuations around the Eternal Veil. They're trying to pull their entire system further out of sync with our time stream. Joe's expression hardened. They're running. Lieutenant, activate the temporal anchors. Let's show them another gift from the precursors. The Hyperion's hidden structures pulsed with blinding energy. Similar pulses emanated from the other human ships and Dr. Verma's devices around the Eternal Veil. Space itself seemed to shudder as multiple temporal fields collided. Temporal connectivity established, Patel announced. We're holding them in our time stream. The Eternal Overseer's image flickered violently. You don't understand what you're doing. The temporal isolation isn't just for us, it's containing something else. Something that cannot be allowed to enter this time stream. Joe leaned forward. Then perhaps it's time you told us exactly what that something is. Because whatever you're hiding, whatever threat you're containing, humanity and its allies are now strong enough to face it together. The Coalition fleet, realizing they'd been manipulated, began powering down their weapons. The Eternal ships hung in space, trapped between time streams, as their greatest secret teetered on the brink of exposure. In the distance, the Eternal Veil flickered ominously, its perfectly maintained temporal bubble beginning to synchronize with the rest of the universe for the first time in millions of years. Whatever lay behind it would soon be revealed, for better or worse. Space rippled like disturbed water around the Eternal Veil as ancient temporal barriers began to collapse. The combined fleet, now united in common cause, watched in awe as reality itself seemed to bend and flex. On the Hyperion's bridge, Captain Joe and his crew witnessed something that no being in the current universe had seen for millions of years. Temporal synchronization at 60% and climbing, Lieutenant Patel reported, her voice steady despite the extraordinary events unfolding before them. The veil is becoming permeable. Through the quantum link, Dr. Verma's voice crackled with urgency. Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures from within the veil. Whatever they've been containing in there, it's alive. The Eternal Overseer's image flickered back to life on the main screen, their luminescence patterns showing clear distress. Please, you must restore the temporal isolation. What we contain is beyond your comprehension, a fragment of the universe that came before. Explain, Joe demanded, even as the ship's sensors recorded reality-bending readings from within the veil. The Overseer's patterns shifted to a deep, somber hue. The precursors, they weren't just an advanced civilization, they were the last survivors of a previous iteration of the universe. When their cosmos began to collapse, they engineered a way to survive into the next universal cycle, our universe. On the quantum link, Ambassador Chen's voice joined the conversation. And what you're containing? A piece of that previous universe, the Overseer admitted. A fragment of laws and principles that doesn't belong in our cosmic framework. The precursors sealed it away, and we, the Eternals, were tasked with its containment. We removed ourselves from the normal flow of time to maintain the temporal barrier. Dr. Verma's hologram appeared on the bridge, her cybernetic eye glowing intensely. That's why the precursors chose humanity. They encoded their legacy in our DNA, but they also encoded the ability to perceive and interact with cross-universal principles. We're not just their inheritors, we're their solution. The veil flickered again, more violently this time. Through gaps in its structure, the assembled fleet caught glimpses of something that defied comprehension, geometries that shouldn't exist, colors that had no place in this universe's spectrum, forces that operated on principles that violated every known law of physics. Temporal synchronization at 80%, Patel announced. The barrier is failing. Joe stood from his command chair, his decision made. All ships activate your nullfield generators at full power. Doctor, engage all peripheral devices. Lieutenant, divert all power to the precursor systems. Captain, the Overseer protested. You cannot hope to contain this with mere technology. We're not going to contain it, Joe replied calmly. We're going to complete what the precursors started. Humanity wasn't meant to just maintain the barrier, we were engineered to adapt this fragment of the old universe to the laws of the new one. As if in response to his words, the precursor patterns on the human ships began to pulse in perfect synchronization. The null field effect expanded, but instead of negating energy, it began to transform it. The fragment of the old universe exposed to the new principles started to shift and change. Dr. Verma's hologram smiled in understanding. Of course, the null field doesn't just negate, it harmonizes. It brings discordant energies into alignment with our universal constants. That's why it could affect the veil. The process was spectacular and terrifying. The fragment of the old universe, held in stasis for so long, finally began to adapt to its new reality. The impossible geometries shifted into comprehensible forms, the alien energies transformed into patterns that could exist within current universal laws. The Eternal Overseer watched in amazement as their ancient charge transformed. All this time, we thought we were containing a threat, but we were actually preserving it until the solution could evolve. The precursors knew they couldn't adapt it themselves, Chen observed. They needed a species that could bridge the gap between universes that could understand both sets of principles. They needed humanity. The transformation reached its climax. Where the fragment of the old universe had been, there now existed something new, still incredibly powerful, but compatible with the current cosmic framework. The eternal veil, its purpose finally fulfilled, dissolved completely. Joe turned to the Overseer. Your vigil is over. The Eternals can rejoin the normal flow of time, and together we can learn to use this transformed power to benefit all species. The Overseer's patterns shifted to a color never before seen in their species, hope. Perhaps this is why the precursors chose your kind. Not just for your ability to adapt their technology, but for your ability to look forward rather than simply preserve. As the combined fleet began coordinating efforts to study and understand the transformed cosmic fragment, Joe looked out at the assembled ships, former enemies now united in common cause. The nullfield technology, which had seemed like a source of conflict, had actually been the key to resolving an ancient crisis. Send a message to Earth Command, he ordered. Tell them the Precursor's legacy is complete and our real work is just beginning. The stars seemed to shine brighter as the universe, for the first time in millions of years, became truly whole. Humanity had not just inherited the Precursor's technology, they had fulfilled their ancient mission, transforming a fragment of a dead universe into something new, something that could exist and thrive in the present. The galaxy would never be the same, but then change and the ability to adapt to it had been humanity's greatest strength all along.